Welcome to the Gods of Tomorrow podcast, where we discuss religious deconstruction, secular humanism, political activism, and epistemology. Together, we explore how to solve human problems with human solutions. We deconstruct, we activate, and then most importantly, we live our fucking lives. I am your host, Josh Ra, and you are the Gods of Tomorrow. All right. Let's do this shit. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast, and best of all, it's totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 12 of Gods of Tomorrow. I'm Josh Ra. You can call me Josh. And we are back. It has been a hell of a week. I got to take a little bit of a vacation, get up into the mountains, watch the full moon rise up, which was a wonderful, magical experience. It was exciting to do, but probably the most exciting thing that happened while I was on vacation is we busted through that 1,000 mark on YouTube for subscribers. So thank you all so much for growing that channel so much. In addition to that, we came up with a great creed for the Ra cult. From now on, we'll have to end all these episodes by saying, "And do what the fuck you will." I really like it. It kind of actually follows through a theme that my family had that came out of our Irish heritage. That was, if I want to, I will. I am going to make t-shirts today and put it up on my store that says, "And do the fuck what you will." And I hope you guys grab those and start wearing them around. But more exciting than anything is that we have a guest again today on Gods of Tomorrow. It is an old friend that I met at the Atheist Convention down in Georgia, where we probably barely escaped with our lives. But good to have you here, Rion. You have a wonderful story and a lot of knowledge, and so I'm excited to dive into this. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed meeting you and your wife. It was probably one of the high points, I would say, coming away with some good friends. Yeah, and you're starting a cult. I'm getting kind of jealous here. I started my cult and I'm not too far ahead of you. So I guess I got to start looking at numbers here. Your cult's doing better than mine.
We might just have to combine them at some point. No, my wife and
okay.
My wife and I continuously say that meeting you and your husband was a joy too. We were just actually talking this last week about how we need to get Rion and her husband and just go on a trip over to Europe at some point without any kids and just walk through the hills. Be glorious.
Oh, see some old sites. I love that. Like hiking, seeing like old stone markers and things that's my jam. I'm down. Let's do it.
It is mine too. I told the wife if we could just get rid of the kids and just go around and see like old sites all around the world with a couple of good friends, that would be the dream.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah, that would be living the dream. I've always wanted to travel and I love like the history and the archaeological. I would love to dig up some shit too. Okay, nothing illegal. No grave robbing, okay? But I'm just saying, like, approved. But I think that would be quite fascinating. Something I do intend to do in my life.
Just go start digging shit up.
Yeah, just in my backyard. Oh, there's Rion digging in the dirt again. Is she burying stuff or is she digging stuff up? We don't know.
Yeah, I switched my degree for a while I was in college to anthropology because I wanted to go into anthropology and archaeology and do that for work. And then I realized I have kids and it's just not feasible. And so ended up having to shift gears and go in a different direction. But it would have been a wonderful life. I probably could have done it and dragged kids around, but they would not have enjoyed it.
That would be rough. It's really tough on kids to relocate them like that. I've been through it, not fun. We can maybe talk a little bit about that, yeah, but I've been through that and it happens. You have to do what you have to do to maintain a family, but it does make it a little more difficult on them. But again, you gotta survive. The world is tough out there. You gotta survive right now. So
Oh,
I don't blame people for getting by.
Yeah,
You know?
our world is looking crazier and crazier by the moment, especially here in
Oh,
the
it's
West.
terrifying.
Yeah, and I feel like you're tapped into some sources that maybe not everyone is familiar with, because you get some news that I see on your YouTube channel sometimes on Cultastic that just like
Yeah.
share some heavy religious news that like I'm not aware of. I'm not in those circles to really know the information that's coming through to you.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my foot in it. I want to make sure that I got like my ears peeled because I just feel like it's all connected. I mean, I don't know how. I just know that money, power, church, it all goes hand in hand. So education is probably one of the best things that we have right now. So that's why it's important to me to just, I gotta deconstruct this shit so I can help other people who are starting to, because people are waking up out of this fog and realizing like, oh, we are fucked. Like something is not right here. And I just want to be helping people out. Like, come on, we got this. Like, come on, keep it coming. Something's got to happen. So I just want to be that person if I can to lend a hand.
Well, let's take a step into that journey that you've taken. You've spent almost 40 years as a Jehovah Witness before you deconstructed from that. Can you kind of show us the beginning of that journey? How did you get into being a Jehovah Witness, and what did your breaking away look like?
So as far as like the deconstructing part, that really has been recent. That just truly started about 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. So I guess over 2 years. My gosh, I'm like these past couple of years, like they're just like time has been like weirded out. But that kind of happened because of something that my daughter had said to me that kind of propelled me into deconstructing. But before that, just a few years before I'd gotten married to my husband, I had been attending the meetings. So I was studying the Bible. I was single and feeling like, something's wrong with me. Obviously I was making a lot of bad choices. And I thought, okay, well, maybe if I just really put my heart into it, maybe something really is just wrong with me. But if I try as an adult, like really give it a good try, maybe something will work. And I did that. I was reading the Bible. And the thing is I was reading myself right back out of religion again. Like I was sitting there listening to this gibberish, quite frankly, as an adult now, going, okay, that's not what okay, that's in the context of it. That doesn't say that. If you read before and after, that is not at all what that example was. Like you've completely changed the outline here. But that, that's on the deconstructing part and what kind of made that happen. But what had gotten me, long story, gotten me into the religion was my parents. My mother was, her parents had gotten into the religion later as adults. And my mom had a very bad upbringing. My grandfather was very abusive. God rest his soul. I still love him, but you got to deal with these things. You got to talk about these things because things got to change. I got to change. We all got to change. But so my mom left the house very young. She left at 14, got married, and had me at 15. So, things weren't great between my mom and my dad either. He was abusive too. So that's, you kind of keep these cycles going when you don't break them. And at some point, years later, my parents decided let's give this a go. It kind of changed my grandfather's life. So, he stopped doing, took a long time, but he stopped doing the things that he was, the abuse and stuff. So my parents were like, okay, well, maybe this will be the cure for my father too.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I wasn't really a Jehovah's Witness per se growing up, I didn't celebrate anything. We really didn't do all that stuff. And I didn't understand quite why. It was kind of confusing, but it's neither here nor there. Who gives a shit about presents? Okay. It sucks, but whatever. But at some point, my parents try to straighten up their life. I'm somewhere around, I guess it's maybe between 8 and 10. Mm-hmm. Things start to change. And in some ways, it is in a positive. So, as a young child, okay, I'm seeing some change. finally, it's taken years, and then finally from 10 to 12, there's like another marker where I'd say like the abuse like completely stops in the family. So there is change. And then there's all this love bombing that happens when you come in to the Jehovah's Witness organization. So as a kid, you're just seeing all these like what seem to be fun things, and you're getting attention you never had before. So it just seems like everything's cool. And it probably wasn't. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to recap. So your grandfather had been in it. He had an anecdotal story of having some change based on that experience. Your parents were like, if it's working for him, we're going to try this for our own life. So they get involved in the church mainly just as like a social thing, more than just being like hardcore deep diving into the religion, but more of like a intermittent social type of interaction with the church. And it took a long time, but then they had their own anecdotal experience that felt like things were getting better as well. So they continued doing it. And then you started seeing these changes coming into adolescence as well. So you kind of already had this, that's what I'm looking for, like this base of religion as being this intermittent thing you were engaging with. And as you came into adolescence, you then started seeing like this connection and this familiarity and this bonding that was taking place. And I'm not familiar with the term love bonding. Is it something specific to
bombing?
Bombing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what exactly is love bombing? Is this something specific to a tactic that is used, or is it just okay? Tell us more.
It is a cultastic tactic that cults use. And when you first are brought into the cult, basically, they just everybody wants to know who you are. They want to get you involved. They want to invite you to things. They want to encourage you to come to stuff. I mean, it's just a lot of people putting a lot of tension on you. And when you don't have that, most people probably don't have that. That's probably why you're looking for something, because something is lacking in your life. That fills a huge void, and it feels really good to have people who care about you. But when all that fades, because that does fade eventually, like at some point, you're now expected to be exactly who you signed up to be. And there's no faltering from that. And that, I think, is when I started to, like, at about that age 12 is when I started to see, like, okay, wait a minute, like things aren't exactly as I thought they were going to be. Like, okay, nobody's getting their head bashed in around here, but like, there's still that misogynistic, like verbal stuff that you get inside the families, inside the church. So that hadn't changed. And it makes you feel really icky as a kid, because, that's the times like you're questioning your existence. Like you're just really coming into being like a full-fledged feeling human being with a lot of hormones going on. And you're getting a lot of negative verbiage from parents and, again, from inside the church.
Can you give us an example of what some of that looks like? I mean, it sounds like they're giving a lot of order and direction and sense of community for a while, and then you're reaching an age of maturity, coming into womanhood, for lack of a better word. And this is at this point you start seeing some of this patriarchal, controlling type of engagement. So can you give us some examples of what that looked like, or things that you heard?
Well, you're expected. So if you, let's say, for instance, to be a Jehovah's Witness, you have standards that you have to, like, to be in good standing, let's say, because good standing is different than somebody who's not in good standing. So a good standing person is somebody who you'd want to associate, who you want to go out and service with, who this is just something that somebody who you want to keep in your circle, because those other people could pull you astray. So some of the standards that you have to keep are, you have to make every meeting. You have to be reporting time. The list goes on. But if you at some points are ill, if you need more hours because you can't pay your bills, like if there's reasons why you're not meeting these standards now, all these people who are just like, oh, it's okay, you can do this and we love you and things are going to be great. And look how much Jehovah loves you and look how much we love you. And doesn't this feel good? And then it's like, okay, well, we know you need money, but Jehovah will provide. You should be here. You have responsibility. What examples are you setting for your family by missing a meet? Like everything flips, and instead of being this loving situation, it's now it's really this powder keg of responsibility, of keeping up the charade of being happy. Like, you can't let people know you're not happy. They might pretend you can, but it's always going to lead back to a scripture. And if that scripture doesn't heal, like, what's wrong with you? And they don't really, now they're a little bit better. I think they do kind of tell people you can seek therapy, but these therapists are only going to be approved therapists. So you're mostly just, your therapy is by men who don't have any training, no training whatsoever. They're just men of age who have kept these standards that I've given you, who now have privileges. And that is the only reason they have privileges. And these privileges are the ones that only men can have. I would never be able to have them myself. I'm not worthy somehow. As a female, I'm not worthy. And and that misogyny just trickles down. If there's only men at the top, the representation is only males, it's gonna fall on them kids.
So a large piece that's being pushed onto the youth, especially adolescents coming in, and women, is that you have to put on a mask, you have to meet these certain expectations, you need to be in constant service to our cause and to our creed. And if you are falling behind at any point, you need to go seek out the guidance of one of the elders.
Yep.
Or one of the men.
Basically, that is it. Like, if you, anytime, like because I ask a lot of questions. Like, if you know me, I ask a lot of questions. And hey, that's how I learn. Sorry, you don't like it, go away. But I would ask questions. And then if, like, my parents couldn't, well, yes, brother so-and-so. And I think that in a way, unfortunately, that put a mark on my head, because I'm very curious, and that's really not a good thing. You don't want to, because at some point that's questioning authority. Like, if you're just not taking what is laid out before you in whatever their publications say, then you're deviating from the plan. And I think you're seen as really, again, like, Mark, you're bad, you're possibly bad association. And I see that now, but as a kid, I didn't realize, like, that was what I was doing. But again, like you said, I very much felt like I had to put on a mask and pretend like I've never talked to anybody. Like, this is the most I've ever talked about, really, like, what I went through as a kid now as an adult, because I just never talked about it, because it's not this, like, okay, so we'll say, okay, so so-and-so and so-and-so, like, this family, you know, there was drugs and there was abuse and blah, blah, blah. But now look, like, now they're happy and they've got, steady lifestyle, and they're not on drugs and everything's good. And now you're just supposed to be that, like, we're the representation, like, we're the jolly good family that everybody points to. Like, look at that example, see what, like, Jehovah can do for you. But meanwhile, I never got to talk about what had happened. I never got to get my feelings out about it. It was all just stuffed inside, just wearing that mask. And it was about 16 where that, like, I was hitting a wall. I was really kind of done, honestly. Like, I didn't even know that I was having, like, those bad ideations, because I didn't know what they were. I just always knew that I just didn't kind of want to be here, because what's the point when everybody's always telling you, everything you think is bad, and oh God, you had a thought, like, oh, that's almost just like doing it, poke out your eyes so that way you don't sin. Like, all of that kind of stuff sticks in your head as a kid, and you've already been through trauma, and you don't have any way to get it out. You're not allowed to go into any kind of sports at school. There's no extracurricular activities. So especially probably somebody, I think I have like ADHD or some, it's hard for me to stay still. Not giving me somewhere to get that energy out was really bad for me. So this whole one religion, like, it's like a one size fits all religion, and it doesn't fit all, but you got to fit in there. You've just got to make it fit. You've got to make it work. And I was tired. I didn't want to make it work anymore. It didn't work. Obviously, I'm still here. But, if if I look at myself and think, God, there's other kids who feel this way. There cannot be other kids who aren't saying like, I don't want to live like this. Oh my God, I'm a horrible person because I have these thoughts. Like, no, honey, that's having a brain. Mm-hmm. It's the self-control is what makes us like human, brah. You know what I mean? You have thoughts. That's being human. It's being able to control and like say, okay, I would never do something like that. You know, you can't, people didn't understand their brains back then. And we're trying to keep this modern life in this archaic brain, and it doesn't work. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense, but
it does to me. I know I can see your body language, and maybe not everyone can see that, but it does make sense to me. I think the piece that I'm curious about is that I have seen, of course, that you've seen yourself as being in the Jehovah's Witness mindset for a really long time, even if you weren't necessarily in the church and being active, because that code was already written in your mind about how to think and how to behave and how to act in the world around you, even if you weren't regularly going to church. And so from adolescence, it sounds like you already knew you needed something more. You're already breaking away from maybe feeling as embedded within the faith that had been given to you through your familial history. So then going into like young adulthood and into your 30s, did you feel like, you know, I'm still a Jehovah's Witness? Or did you just start searching at that point for something else? Or did you just like put it on the back burner and go, I can't touch this. Like, it is what it is. I'm going to have to entertain myself by another means.
So because of like marriage, things like of that nature that happened, I did have a period where I did break away from like going to the Kingdom Hall regularly. And that was good in a way because it helped my brain in many different ways. The situation sucked in a lot of ways, good things, but bad things. But what the issue is, what happened is I would go back to the Kingdom Hall. And a lot of that was because of the situation I was in, and I'd have to go back to my parents. So every time I'd get this break and I'd kind of think like, this stuff doesn't seem right. But, you know, you're not allowed to do any research because that's being an apostate. So I didn't really do research, but I had read one book that I eventually threw away because then I felt guilty for it.
Yeah, you're icky because you read that darn apostate book.
And it was such a good book, and I'm so freaking mad now that I threw it away. But anyway, you know, I got some like witchcraft book, and I was really starting to read into that and wanted to get to know more. But again, you know, left the ex, went to my parents, had to start going back to meetings because if you live there, that you have to go to the meetings. And then I'd feel guilty and I'd throw all that stuff away, and it was like rinse, repeat, and these cycles would happen. And it wasn't until I was asked a question by my daughter that mindset, I was able to break through that ceiling. I finally broke through because my daughter gave me permission. Mm-hmm. If that isn't some shit, my parents, all the adults around me, like none of the people I ever talked to ever gave me permission to question what we were being taught. And here's my kid who's just like, hey, Mom, I just watched a TV show with my boyfriend, and they said that the Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult, and I think they're a cult. And I was like, they're a cult? And my head exploded for probably a good solid like month. Like it was just a cult. It's a cult. And then it was starting to click. It was really starting to click because I had lived all those years, even though I wasn't maybe going to the kingdom. I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was a Jehovah's Witness because I still was thinking I was a bad person. I was doing all these sins. I was feeling guilty. I was everything I was not supposed to be, and I knew it. And I saw the world as through that Jehovah's Witness lens. And it's really different. It's really different. And it's not a good way to see the world, let me tell you. Rose-colored glasses, and they aren't even rose-colored glasses. But that's when I finally was able to see that this is a mindset. This isn't just like something that you just say, oh, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness anymore. It's that simple. You've really got to do the work. People need to, I know that might sound scary and difficult, but you have to do the work or you might just go back to it. You'll find another cult. you'll find another something else that's toxic. You've got to remove the toxicity and be able to see what's truth and what's just downright lies on purpose. I feel like most of it's on purpose, but.
And for me, Rion, that realization that you have and share is the strongest piece of your testimony. And I think it's what a lot of individuals can relate with that have broken away from any type of organized religion, whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses or something else, because you leave that one specific sect and you immediately go and start looking for another one. Oh, if I can't be a Jehovah's Witness,
Yes.
maybe I'll be a Mormon, or maybe I'll be a Methodist or a Baptist.
Ooh.
Or, okay, I'm going to leave Christianity. I'm going to go convert to Islam. Like, it's just a constant moving, and shifting gears into the next one, because you're trying to find something familiar to you that has been ingrained into your brain as a young child of this is the only way. This has to be a truth. Maybe it's not that version of the truth. It's a slight variation of that version. And I see so many adults that are our age that now struggle with this because they are constantly looking for that right version of what they're being told. They can't trust this one, but maybe the next door over will tell them what they need.
And I think that's where the faith needs to come in. Like, if you want to have some kind of belief, have it. You know, just know the truth about it. Okay, Jesus might not have been a real dude, but if you think there's some cool shit in there that he said that, you know, brings your heart joy, I don't see a problem with it. But you got to understand that the rest of us see it for what it is, and you can't force us to believe it and stand by it. Sorry. That's where you just got to keep the faith to yourself. And I'm okay with you. I will stand by you. I will even actually help you. Like, you women who want to stay in this stuff, I will help you get your goddamn place back, because I'm going to help show you where the women were very powerful in that book, you know? So I'm for it, but you got to leave me out of it. Like, leave my uterus and everybody else's bodies out of it. Sorry. That's where I draw the line.
Well, and that's a message that I think you and I both share. I've heard both of us talk about this on our own channels, of if you want your faith and you want your religion, have it. I'll fight for you to have it, but it should not come into play with my laws and my community and my children. Leave that out. If you want to believe it, that's great. But really the purpose of what I'm doing here, and I think what you do on your channel too, is I just want to bring you some religious literacy. I just want to teach you about where it comes from and how it progressed or evolved into the state that it's in. And if you're okay with that and you still want to believe all of it, that's great. And I support you in that path. I just want you to know, instead of whatever you were told by, as I watched one of your YouTube videos today, as you may have been told by a bunch of white guys in the 3rd and 4th centuries.
I mean, I'm sorry, but that's really what, like, if you want to break it down, break it down. I had another friend in a private conversation said something about Luke being Paul's physician. And I was like, okay, where did you hear that?
The fuck he was.
And they were like, wait, it's not true. And I said, well, let's look at the evidence. Not true. Like, you have to start separating what you've been told from what's really there. And first it's going to be, you have to just read it for yourself and see how there's been so many connections made that were never, they're just not there. And again, that's okay. That's fine. But it's not enough to control people's bodies. That's just not going to be able to do it. But you've really got to start tearing this stuff apart and figuring out when it was written, who's the audience, you know, that's a big part of it. There's so much to it, but I think it's fun. If it's not obvious, I enjoy it.
Well, before we jump into your academic pursuits that you've been doing and researching things and what you found in your deconstruction journey, is there anything you just wish people knew about the Jehovah's Witnesses? Something about that cult, as you put it, or branch or sect? What is something you just wish people were aware of that they just have no idea about? Because I did read that in 2008, it was the fastest growing sect in Canada and the United States. And I've also seen recently that they have marked Mormonism as being the fastest growing sect. But in 2008, it was marked as the fastest growing sect in Canada and the US. So I found that intriguing that they're recruiting people.
Right. And yeah, these are two religions who proselytize, who absolutely do recruiting. And, you know, when you said, like, what is something you'd want people to know? Here's what I want you to know. Lovely, people get caught up in bad situations. And the Jehovah's Witness organization is a doomsday cult. And don't let their numbers fool you. Good people can be vulnerable. And when you are doing proselytization like they do in waves, you're going to find vulnerable people who probably need some good therapy. But we don't have a good healthcare system. So this feels good for a while. But once you are inside, you realize that it is very conditional, and it is based on standards that entitled, rich men who have made these systems to benefit themselves and nobody but. And you are not allowed to ask questions because, like I said, somebody like me who asks questions, you get seen and marked. And once you're marked, it's not a good place to be, because getting out of it means you have to bend over backwards. And if the only way that you can keep people loving you is by upholding standards that are harmful and hurtful to you, it is not a safe place to be. And they allow conditions that harm children. They have hidden pedophiles because they believe that their standards are higher than the governmental standards, and they don't trust the government. So everything is held in-house. And it's only recently because people, amazing people like Mark O'Donnell, there's many people in the JW activism circuit who are raising the flags and letting people know that this cult is hiding pedophiles. Call Bethel, check that podcast out, please. Call Bethel. And you have no recourse, because again, your only recourse is men who are not trained to handle these kind of situations. And they cannot and will not protect children. So when they come to your door, remember that you, in order to be one of them, must do what they do. So you must see yourself at people's doors with that smile, knowing all that information that I just gave you, and see if you can sleep at night.
Yeah, see if you can stomach that. I appreciate that
I
piece.
couldn't.
It's interesting, Brian, because when I think of you using that language of them being a doomsday cult, and I'm a firm believer in this. This is what I found in my own research, but Christianity, even the teachings of Jesus, was also an apocalyptic cult. It was a doomsday cult as well. It was built off of the Essenes. And it came also from John the Baptist, who was also part of the Essenes. And that is why it spread so quickly in that time, was because it was an apocalyptic doomsday cult. And we see these other branches of this belief system using the same tactics to grow rapidly across the West.
Yeah. Did you hear about the Gabriel stone?
I did. I do know about that. Simon of Perea.
Right? This is going back way before, these people were out there. This kind of idea has been, this is not new. This is just recycled. Sorry, not to be mean, but it, like you said, it's borrowed stories. They really are. They're just borrowed stories, whispers down the lane. Whisper on the telephone, whatever that
Whisper on the telephone, motherfuckers.
Exactly.
But it's interesting. I need to really look into this a little bit more, but I do think there is something especially interesting about the human psyche and our concern about our own mortality, and how these types of doomsday apocalyptic messages drive us into fanaticism. Because we are so concerned about our mortality and end of life and unanswerable questions and the unknown, that when people bring these answers to us in such a confident way, we fall victim to it, and we just gobble it right up, and then we become just as fanatical as the people that share the message with us if we start drinking that Kool-Aid. And so I'm very wary now on the other side of the fence from anything that sounds apocalyptic or doomsday-like. Because I'm like, no, this is something that if I allow it to pierce through this shield wall I got built in front of me, it's going to lead me back into a place of where I can't think for myself because I've been completely brainwashed by the individuals that fed me this shit.
Right? Yeah. You do get brainwashed. And again, like I said, vulnerable people. People need love, man. People need attention. People need to know they're important. And when you give that to them, you pretty much almost feed them crap. And they're going to like, yeah, this crap's not too bad. I'll take it. Really. I hate to say it, but it's easy to take those who aren't, people have good hearts, maybe. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to do good. Everybody wants to see themselves better. And if somebody comes to your door and says, hey, not only is there a paradise on earth coming for you, if you listen to what we got to say, but we're going to make you feel better because we can help heal you. That sounds freaking good. Mm-hmm. It does sound good on the surface, but it tastes like shit.
All right, Ryan, I don't want us to run out of time before we dive into the fun stuff. So okay. Talk to us about your real journey into deconstruction, where you've been at in these last couple of years, and really just backpedaling through history and trying to find a source of some of these recycled stories and sometimes rebranded stories from the Bible that are now being covered up, hidden, and completely removed from Christianity in general.
Right. Well, I think one of the biggest ones for me was Moses. When I forget how, I think it was because I heard of Sargon of Icad. And I was like, okay, who's this? Because I think I was looking at maybe Inanna at the time. Mm-hmm. So I was just doing a lot of stuff that wasn't clicking for me.
We're going to have to share some details with some of these things. Sargon of Icad was a Sumerian king.
Yes.
Inanna was a goddess of old Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. Yeah. I just want to give readers who aren't familiar with these things some of the... Go ahead.
Yeah, so pretty badass people, basically. I mean, a badass goddess and, a pretty kick-ass dude who had this high priestess whose name was Hadwana. And she's actually, from what I know, she's the first poet with her name signed. So we have like a poem with her name signed on it, the first in history. And it's like 3,000 or something, some odd years old. Mm-hmm. So this is some really cool ancient history. And you can see how it just kind of traveled across to Canaan, just, some different names, different stories. But so I had come across Sargon of Icad's story, and I was like, okay, let me read about it. And, he's put in this basket and he's floated down a river. And the videos, like, if you want to find the video is literally, because I wanted people to see me breaking stuff down. I was like, you're going to come with me on this journey. I'm going to teach you what I know, and you're going to watch it as it happens. So I recorded this video, and I'm reading all these things about Sargon of Icad, and I'm like, that is freaking Moses' story.
Yeah.
It is this, okay, obviously some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it's really just a repackaged story for a new group of people. Mm-hmm. And then you see it in other stories, and I can't even think, like, obviously the flood story is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. With
when I realized,
yep.
I was like, but there's not just one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's hundreds, and I've only been reading like maybe about a core 4, trying to, really get them and break them down. And a lot of it because it's similar language, like Tihom, Tiamat. So Tihom in the Hebrew Bible, when God first, created the earth or whatever, the Tihom was the chaos, the watery dragon. Well, Tiamat is the primordial, I think it's salt water.
Yeah. That
the earth, everything is made from after she's killed by Marduk, the great god. So it's, again, these cool stories of, thousands of years, well, maybe 1,000, 2,000 years prior to the time they're, written down in the Hebrew literature, and just kind of reformed and repackaged again. Super cool. I get it. Why wouldn't you do it? Everybody did it. Everybody's doing it. Why wouldn't you? But it was blowing my mind that people who I thought existed, people who I was told hand wrote the first 5 books of the Bible didn't exist. And I started to question my freaking existence, dude. I was like, wait a minute. If he doesn't exist, does Jesus exist? And then I started going down, and there was so many. It was really hard because I had so many questions. I couldn't, I just got excited, and I'm like reading this, and then the next day I'm reading that, and none of it's connecting. It's finally starting to connect now, but I just had to know that answer at the moment. And now I have for a while, I think I was kind of angry about it. God damn it. They damn lied to me. But now I have a greater respect for it because it's just what you would do. If you want to tell your story, of course, you're not just going to say, yeah, hey, 5 people rolled in here. They had some babies and eventually they grew. You're not going to say that. You're going to make some stories up. You're going to embellish. And this is how they did it. Yeah. And I think it's cool in the historic sense of what they wanted to tell of their story. We just have to remember that it's one-sided, and there's 500 different sides to those stories.
Yeah. So I know that I use language sometimes like borrowed and, plagiarized and repackaged in language like that. But chances are that even prior to Sumerian civilization or Mesopotamian civilization or the Indus Valley, before we had cuneiform and could write out these stories, these same stories were probably shared in previous civilizations. And then we had the invention of writing, and people started retelling them and repackaging them with their own stories. And then we had, of course, these drifted over into Canaan, where we saw the Israelites emerge out of and needed to make a name for their own people, and took these stories and repackaged them for their own people as well. I think it's something that's been repeated throughout history, time and time again, in order to give a sense of definition and ownership and, individuality or some sort of piece for the stories. But we now see them being utilized pretty heavily to influence and control, and claiming that all the rest of these stories don't exist, or that this connection isn't real.
Yes. And that is one of the biggest things that pisses me off, is when people say, well, they're not real. This one's real. Okay. Well, that doesn't make sense. No. Or they'll say all those other gods are demons. I'm like, okay, no. That's quite bigoted. Sorry to bring it down to you, but that is a very narrow-minded way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's more likely these are just stories that, we're just told as gets changed a little bit here, there, whatnot. And then obviously there was a time when, after the exile, everything was really kind of changed. But obviously there was a reason and a need for these stories as these people were growing, and thank God they did. We see some a lot of cool language and things that we would never have known had they not done it. I'm thankful for it. I'm just sad that it's been commandeered by extremists who want to poo-poo everything else and see this very narrow, whitewashed view of a history. And it's really not fair. It's not fair to all those other gods and all those other stories and all those other people who lived it and believed it. And certainly for even the Israelites who also too lived it, believed it, who believed these other gods, worshiped these other gods, respected these other gods. Don't lie about it. Tell the truth about it. Your faith should take you further. Your faith should be able to cover all that, right?
Wouldn't it just be a beautiful world if we could look back at all these things and recognize them as our shared stories of existence of humankind, and not some sort of specialized tale that...
Yes. See, that's why it could be so beautiful. Like, oh, look, this is how they used to, like, look how much better we are now. We don't sell our children. We don't assault children. We don't invade people's territory and then, tell bad things about that. Like, wouldn't it be so nice if we could actually learn from them instead of saying, no, these are good stories. These are good men. Lots of good men. F you, no, he's sick. That dude's a perv. I don't care what you say. I don't want any kind of religion that has anything to do with that dude. No, thank you. That's what I don't get. That makes zero sense to me.
So I know you mentioned a little bit, and I don't know what your knowledge is on this specifically, but you talked about the post-exilic period and how we really saw monotheism come out into Judaism specifically, as this was kind of after the temple had fallen, and this belief system in the one single God kind of permeated throughout the area. Yeah. Are there certain things that you found in the text? I'm thinking specifically of Asherah, because I know that's kind of your bread and butter, but things that you saw that shifted between the two of those, that you're just really trying to get the message out there about how some of these gods and goddesses were demonized and weren't carried over, and how that emergence of monotheism in the way that we think about it today, because I know I'm rambling a little bit, but the way that they thought about it pre-exilic is different than how we think about it now. Like, we think of monotheism as one single God over everything. Back then it was like, there's all these gods, but we worship this one God, and that was a monotheistic group. But after that time period, there was a huge shift. The gods and goddesses were demonized, and then there was this recognition of a one single God, and all these other ones just kind of thrown under the bus.
So what I would like to say is, when you think back, just think back to who is the first chosen people that Yahweh supposedly picks to be the king, right? He's chosen David, Solomon. These were the dudes who were responsible. If we believe you, Bible, these were the dudes that God handpicked to start spreading his seed, right? To start doing the do. And these men set up temples with Yahweh, temples with Asherah, temples with images. And this is who God blessed them. Okay? These were the foundations of why, supposedly, why Asherah and all these other gods were worshipped, because it was approved. I mean, they would marry ladies from other countries, make some cashola, bring them on over, bring some priests with them, bring all the money and power, build a temple. I mean, this is just what you did. So it's okay to build off of these people's backs. But then, you want to write a story later on to say, oh, they were bad. Yeah, but they were bad. Okay, so God bless them here. But right here, they were bad. If that doesn't sound like some kind of redaction, that I don't know what would be, because up until those moments, it's evident up until the exile that she was around. I mean, the archaeology shows it. I mean, even up until, I don't know, I believe 3rd century, etc., there's still figurines and stuff. So it's not something that just went away. This whole monotheism, in my opinion, I don't even think that came around. I don't know, maybe Christianity, because I even think, like, after the exile, because if you think about it, I mean, I don't know, I'm just kind of riffing here, but if you think about it, think about when Moses wrote the 10 Commandments, right? We always say, like, okay, don't put other gods before me. So he admits there's other gods. So I believe that they thought there were other gods, and I don't remember which. It could be like henotheistic or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like you.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Okay,
yes.
Like, my God's the right one. I know y'all exist, but F you, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that's how they were. So they weren't monotheistic. So the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, is not anywhere. It's just not monotheistic. And possibly, I guess, maybe you could say the New Testament is, but how can you say the New Testament's monotheistic when you got a man God and supposed Hebrew God? Anyhow, I don't even know where I was going with that.
I agree with you.
But obviously,
I use those sometimes because I hear people say, well, no, they're a monotheistic, culture in the 6th century. I personally believe it was henotheistic as well. I think there's probably a little bit of a shift from the more widespread henotheism into subsects that were like, nope, there's only Yahweh. He's now the creator of everything and all things. And I think there's some evidence of that. But I hear it so often when people are like, oh, it's monotheistic. I agree with you. I think it's more henotheistic. That's what we see in archaeology. Yeah. That's what we see in history. And that's what we see in the Bible. And I like that you point out that if you read through the Bible from chapter to chapter, not in the order that they're written, but in the order that they're structured, but in the order they were actually chronologically written by dating, you see a very clear progression of what the concept of the gods and goddesses were and how it evolved through the history in which they were written. And it changes. Right. It changes from writer to writer.
Yeah. Well, because, this really wasn't, it was like I made a comment on your thing, and I know you know, but I just love to tell people, because it's one of the things I've learned, is that the Bible is not supposed to be this one compact book. It should never have been put together. This is a library of books where there should be other books. Think of all the books that have been omitted. This is just I keep picking up my phone. I think it's because I'm looking at you, so I feel I have to show you what I'm doing. But it should never have been put together. So it would be better suited if it was like some kind of library you walked into and you pulled this book and you read it and you put it back, and because you wouldn't have this feeling of you have to put it together and you have to make it make sense, because it was never really supposed to. And I don't think the writers even cared, like the early writer. You can tell there's just some things that don't make sense, and I think they're just okay with it. Look at the book of Chronicles and Kings. They tell like so many conflicting stories. Yeah. It wasn't a big deal.
And most of these aren't even written by the same writers. It's books within it that are multiple writers that they then combine scrolls again. I think Isaiah is one of them, where there's like 1,000 years separation between like the first part and the second part, because they just took 2 different scrolls and smashed them together and said it was all written by one person.
Right. Yeah. And this is the stuff like that blows my mind. Like I'd have no idea if I had never looked into it. But I'm so thankful that I have, because it just gives it just tells you how much Christianity has got wrong, honestly. That's one big part of it. But another part of it is just, again, the history, the real history behind it. Why did they do that? Well, what was happening at the time when they wrote that? Okay, well, why did they want to redact the goddess? Like, why would you want to do that? Okay, well, you want to remove power. Why do you want to strip people of their power, especially their progenitor goddess, right? The one who can help you give birth. Why would they want to get rid of her power? Call me a wild person. You just come out of Babylon. You're watching temples and stuff getting built to these other gods. They're rebuilt. Actually, weren't they helping to repair one of the ziggurats? And we have inscriptions, like bricks inscriptions about that. So we know that these Israelites were exiled to Babylon. They're helping build temple to other gods. This probably was very upsetting to people, I'm sure. And when they finally get to come back, after their temple's been destroyed, something they probably never thought they would see. You would never think that a temple that had been standing for so long would be destroyed. That just probably broke your heart. I can completely get it. Honestly, it actually breaks my heart too. I hate that shit. I wish they would have, how amazing would that be? But so when they come back, now they're like, okay, well, why did this happen to us? So either this is all for control coming from the masters, the Babylonians, you know what I mean? Who knows what they're taught there? Because why would you come back and do that to your people? Or maybe this was shit. We had our asses handed to us. We're knocking everything out. But I honestly feel like a lot of this was kind of coming from the powerful, because this was the elite who have these documents, who are able to get their hands on and have the ability to read and write and change all this stuff, because they did a pretty good god damn, if we didn't have some smart people, scholars out here reading this shit and figure it out, we'd still be believing it, because a lot of this is still, y'all, if you're interested, you need to get out there and start studying, because there's some stuff that's still being discovered. We need people out there studying this stuff. I'm too old for it. But but we can see, again, we can just see why things change when they change. So it's really important to see that history and how it comes into play, instead of just doing this whitewashing and make believe that the Christians do. It's not acceptable. Not acceptable. Not good scholarship.
I so much appreciate having you on here, Rion. I think that you and I could talk for a long, long while. I have so many thoughts about Marduk and his connection with Yahweh and the similarities you see there, about the creator goddess in ancient Sumerian and Mesopotamian, and how that was wiped out and made into a masculine deity that was the creator, even though the stories are the same. And I know you know all this, and we could go on and on and on, but we're so far beyond time, and I've kept you over the time that I promised you. So if you would, let people know where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and hear more about these wonderful stories.
I do a lot of stories on my TikTok, which is tax.the.churches. And I'm trying to start to move most of my things over to my YouTube channel, which is Rion, Rion, Cultastic. Because TikTok, I'm just tired of being put on bans and being silenced, because people don't like hearing the truth, I suppose. So if that's where they want to get to learn more, you can also find me on Twitter. And if you want to send me a message, I probably will see it there. And that is Anat, A-N-A-T, love her, Anat_Yahoo, Y-A-H-U. I had to pick something hard, of course.
Well, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I know you jumped on short notice, so I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been amazing. I love talking about this stuff. This gets me going. I could talk for hours.
As for all the rest of you, thanks again for hanging out on Gods of Tomorrow. If you're interested in learning more about this information, you can always look at my Patreon, follow my TikTok as well, or get into my Discord, especially if you're